Hi, this is Patricia Stepler with Your Inside Power, where we are looking at the tools that you have inside of you, or the power that you have inside of you to create the life of your dreams. Well, today I thought we'd talk about mindset because, I talk a lot about mindset and I see that buzzword out there. You need a better mindset, or you need to do this and that with your mindset. And I was like, so what is mindset? Well, here are two definitions that I got from various dictionaries. One says that mindset is the established set of attitudes held by someone. Now, attitudes, as we define them in my world, is your thoughts, your actions, and your feelings. Thoughts, actions, and feelings make up your attitude. So it's saying that mindset is the established set of attitudes held by somebody. Now, the other definition I found about mindset is a person's way of thinking and their opinions. So those are two great definitions of mindset. And basically, they're talking about the habitual patterns that you have that keep you thinking a certain way and doing a certain set of things. Now, if your mindset is exactly the way you want it to be, then it's perfect. But what I have to have you understand is your mindset has been with you since, even before you were born. You were being programmed. We've all been programmed genetically and environmentally. And so some of the things that we do, we don't know why we do them. And, they say the apple doesn't fall far from a tree. Well, that's so true because our mindset has been placed in there sometimes through generations. And we have the same thinking that maybe our parents or our grandparents or our great-grandparents had and never really changed as much. I remember when I was training and doing corporate training, and this was after I had finished my career as an educator. And as I started working with businesses and started working with the leaders in those organizations, what I discovered was that they had very much the same issues with people as teachers do with children, which led me to further believe that we don't really change much. Why don't we change much? Because those habits that we have in our subconscious mind are very powerful. And they don't want us to change. They want us to be comfortable, hence comfort zone. And as long as you stay in a comfort zone, you're never going to reach your full potential. It takes effort to step outside of the comfort zone. It's going to take real determination to move beyond where you are and move beyond your comfort zone. And it's going to be uncomfortable. And we have to accept and be comfortable with what's uncomfortable if we're ever going to change. So that gives you the definition of what a mindset is. Now, let's look at the next part. Why, then, is a mindset so important to our success? And for those of you who have businesses, why is the mindset so important for our business? Well, the mindset enables us to deal with those disappointments or discouragements or challenges that come our way. And depending on what kind of mindset you have or where you are in that mindset, I'm just going to say range from negative to positive and things like that, will determine how you overcome them. Remember that one definition was a person's way of thinking and their opinions. So the way you think, your mindset will help you to overcome challenges. And you can see this. Sometimes people become very discouraged when something goes wrong. And they can even, delve into a mini depression or full-fledged depression because something didn't go the way they wanted it to. and it's so discouraging. Other people with the same type of discouragement will just go, well, okay, what do I need to do to fix that? See, there's two different mindsets, two different ways of thinking about the same situation. And again, that comes from years of programming or from years of trying to change that programming. So your mindset will help you deal with failures or challenges or fears. And the way it does that is by helping you make the right action or decision. And so the, actions are all controlled by the subconscious mind. So that's where these programs are also. So if you want to change your actions, you first have to go in and change the programming. Because if you ever get frustrated because you feel like you're procrastinating, or you feel like you know what to do, but you won't do it, that's part of your mindset. That's part of that habitual thinking. And so we have to go in and change that thinking before we can change the actions. And so that's another reason why mindset is so important. Now, sometimes people talk about positive mindset, negative mindset. Again, it goes back to habits. If you have a positive type mindset, it will give you the idea that when something good is happening, good things will continue to happen. Or even when something bad happens, you'll find that ray of sunshine in that something bad. If you have a negative mindset, that's the way you see the world, as everything's wrong, nothing's going to go right. Kind of like that Eeyore, you are the Eeyores of the world when you look through things through that negative, that nothing is going to go right. So we have to learn to shift that if we want to be highly successful. Now, I want to go back to this quote, which I talked about in the last episode. But it says here, remember, there's no more effort is required to aim high in life to demand abundance and prosperity than is required to accept misery and poverty. So it doesn't take any more effort. It all goes back to your mindset. How are you thinking? Are you thinking of abundance and prosperity, or are you thinking of misery and poverty? I remember one time I was at some conference and they were talking about, the mindset of money and how we, have to get into the mindset that will give us that great abundance. And I remember the speaker on stage talking about, can you ever see a time in your life when you will be homeless? And I thought to myself, no matter how bad things got, I did not ever see myself being homeless. Would it mean maybe I'd have to move to a different house? Yes, but I never saw myself as being homeless, living on the street. And so the whole point of this exercise, and he asked a couple other questions too, but the whole point of that exercise was then just get on with it. Basically, it's never going to get that bad. You're going to figure it out. If you lost your job tomorrow, would you be willing to take something that today looks as like a demotion in order to survive? And I thought, well, of course I would. I would do whatever to survive and to impact my family. I'm not going to just curl up in a ball and, just end life, or, end any type of feeling that I had, because that's the mindset I had. You see, we all have a mindset. What are we doing with that mindset? And if we understood how the mind operated, how much pain and suffering that people go through could be eliminated by just understanding this information. So that's why we have to look at the importance of mindset. Next thing I want to talk about is the mindset formed by habits that we have and patterns, and it goes to how we see the world. So those patterns are habits of how we see the world. Here's another definition I found about mindset: habitual or characteristic mental attitude that determines how you interpret and respond to situations. That's mindset. How do we respond, interpret, and respond to situations? Well, that goes all back to when we talked about intellectual faculties. And we have intuition is one of those faculties. How do we pick up on things? And then, how do we reason, which is another intellectual faculty? How are we reasoning when things are happening in the world? Well, that all goes back to our mindset, our perception. How we perceive things that are happening goes back to the mindset that we have. So when we think of mindset, it's how we see the world. How do we see the world through the lens that we have stored in our subconscious mind? Here's the thing. If we have habits that have even built either mindsets that serve us well or mindsets that do not serve us well, they are habits. And we can change a habit. It's not always comfortable to change a habit, but we absolutely can change a habit. And when we change that habit, we have to make sure that we're building the model of the thing that we want. Our Buckminster Fuller said that, you don't change something. You must build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. That's what we have to do with our habits. If we have a habit that's not serving us well, we have to build a new model. Well, what do you have to do to build a new model? First thing we have to do is to figure out what that new model looks like. And then we can start to build that new model and change our life. And we'll get into that in a minute. Now, the other thing we need to think about with mindset is fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And I'm sure you know people that have growth mindset. Those are the movers and shakers. They are the people that are out there changing the world because they are constantly learning, constantly thinking of new things. I was talking to somebody the other day and we were talking about this kind of a job that was very repetitive. And I said, I can't think of anything more boring than to do that kind of repetitive job. Now, some people don't mind it. It would just drive me insane. Why? Well, because I have a growth mindset and I constantly want to learn things new. And I want to, be able to take opportunities that seem really good and try to improve. Other people have a fixed mindset where they think this is as good as it's going to get. And they probably don't mind some of those repetitive jobs because their mindset is fixed. But let me share with you, again, I talked about this last week. Napoleon Hill saying this: there's a difference between wishing for a thing and being ready to receive it. No one is ready for a thing until they believe they can acquire it. The state of mind must be belief and not mere hope or wish. Open-mindedness is essential for belief. Closed minds will not inspire faith, courage, and belief. So closed minds is like a fixed mindset. You're not going to believe that things can change if you have a fixed mindset. You have to have an open mindset or growth mindset in order to believe that something can change and that things can improve in your life and that you can move forward. Cannot be closed-minded or fixed mindset. So when we look at the next part, how does your mind impact your life? How does your mindset impact your life? Last week, we talked about living on 3 planes. So how does the mindset impact the 3 planes that you live on? You live on a physical plane. The physical plane needs exercise and diet and relationships. Those are all physical. That's the lower side of us, that the part of, taking care of us. Intellectually, which is the second level, the next higher level, we can think of goals. Goals is a very intellectual concept. You write down a goal, you think about a goal, that's intellectual. Can we embrace change? That's intellectual. That's part of that intellect part. Then we talk about self-awareness. They say EQ in the 21st century, EQ will be more important than IQ because you can look anything up. EQ is your emotional intelligence. It's how you relate to people. It's how you're thinking and the emotional side of you. And so that's part of your intellect because you can learn to change that. It's something you can do. So your learning, your growth, do you question things? That's all part of the intellect. Self-confidence. You can build your own self-confidence. If you don't have confidence, you can change that. Self-talk. It's a great way to change your confidence is through self-talk. And gratitude. Those are all parts that I consider more intellectual. Some of these things overlap with physical and with the spiritual, but I think these are more intellectual things because the intellectual things are thoughts. Thoughts are part of, your brain getting this idea. The spiritual part, I believe that has part with the mindset is that visualization. When you start to visualize your world, you are connecting with that spiritual side of you. And you're using that intellectual faculty of the imagination, which is intellectual, right? But you are connecting with that higher side of you. And whenever you're connecting with that higher side of you, that's the spiritual part of you. And so you have that. And what do we need for that? We need to have those meditations. And that's the way we can change this. So how do you change your mindset? First thing I would do is to visualize what kind of life you want. Visualize what kind of person you want to be. As you're doing that, you're connecting with that higher side of you. You see inside of you. If you have a goal or you have a dream inside of you where your spirit is, we'll just say it's inside of us, you have a desire to be or to do more. When you connect with that through meditation and visualization, you are connecting with that higher side of who you are. Maybe not somebody that right now you believe you can be, but as long as you have open-mindedness, like Napoleon Hill talks about, mind must be open to encourage belief and courage and the actions. You must have an open mind to do that. So when you connect with that inner side of you, that higher side of you, that's when you start to change your mindset because you start to develop different beliefs. And as you develop those beliefs, when you start to see yourself doing something that currently you don't think you can do, but in your imagination you do it, you start to build the story. You start to have that self-talk. You start to have the affirmations as to who you are. You start to see yourself as the person that deep inside you want to be. You might say, well, why am I not the person I want to be? Because of that programming. People have said things to you. They may have been very negative. Instead of encouraging you and uplifting you, they may have discouraged you. And so you built this image of who you think you're not. The person you are is that person that is deep inside of you. It's not the person that's on the surface. We build this surface because we think that's the way we're supposed to be. But many of us deep inside have a different image of who we are. And so you have to bring that to the surface. And when you do that, you can do that by imagination, visualization, affirmations, meditation, all those things where you're connecting with that higher side. Now, remember, reality goes behind that image, that imagination. There is a period of time that has to go by from when you first conceive that image till you see it in your reality. And we don't know how long that is. It might be a week. It might be a month. It might be 10 years. We don't know. For those of you who know my son's story, it took him 6 years. 6 years to come up from the time he conceived this idea of getting full scholarship to college until it actually happened. Well, for him, that was kind of known because he was in 6th grade and 12th grade when it all happened. But we don't know how long it's going to take. You see, could he have done that if he'd have waited till 9th grade? Maybe not. I'm not sure that it would have happened had he waited until 9th grade or 10th grade to make that decision he was getting a scholarship. But because he thought of it in 6th grade, he had time to plan and time to invest in his confidence and to see himself doing this. And that's what we need. We need to realize that things don't happen overnight. Now, I do want to tell you about this. I read about different kinds of mindsets, and they talked about success mindset and a positive mindset, an entrepreneurial mindset, and a challenge mindset. And as I was reading this information, I thought, I don't know, are there really 4, or is it less than that? Because so often when we have different mindsets, we have to combine things. You know, so they talked about a success mindset being a growth mindset. Well, so would a positive and entrepreneur and challenge, all growth mindsets. But they said a success mindset is those positive attitudes, those beliefs, those perceptions. Well, okay. But then when we have positive mindset, it says it directs the focus and a proactive approach to challenges. And then an entrepreneurial mindset, they said, is one that embraces risk-taking. And the challenge one is transformational, that holds the power to reprogram the mind. I think it's all one. If you want to change your mindset, you need pieces of all those things. You need to have the belief. You need to have positivity. You need to have that idea of taking a risk and getting outside of your comfort zone. You need to be able to transform yourself and reprogram your mindset. That's just what we need to do if we want to achieve more. Now, like I said, some people are very content with where they are, and that's fine. But if you're not content with where you are, then this is what you have to do to change your mindset. So write down what it is that you'd like, and then write down where you are now. See how far that distance is. You know, if we don't see how far we have to go, then we're not going to put the work behind it. If your goal is way up here and you're way down, you've got a great distance. But if your goal is here and here, it's a very small distance. So you have to have some idea of where you are and be honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself as to where you are, and be honest with yourself as to where you want to go. Sometimes when I'm asked about my goal, you know, and if I'm in a group and there's multiple people sitting around, they're talking about their goals. There have been times in the past when, you know, here was my goal, but because they had these great big goals, I would try to raise my goal. Problem with that is I didn't believe it. You can only believe so far. And when you start to say, oh, I want to make $1 billion. I remember one time somebody saying that, I want to be a billionaire. Well, where are you starting from? Not that you can't, but let's start where you are, because if you start to think, if you're making 100,000, you want to be a billionaire, that's a big jump. Is your mind going to accept that? Or will your mind immediately say to you, it's not possible? So to some degree, we have to do steps. Maybe the ultimate goal is a billionaire, But let's say, where can we go in the next year? Because you're not going to go from 100,000 to a billion in 1 year, unless somebody leaves you a lot of money, right? So we have to start making little steps along the way so that we can get to that ultimate goal. So how do you change your mindset? You change your mindset by starting with awareness, being aware of what your mindset is currently, being aware of how that mindset got there. Is it something that you more or less inherited from your parents or your grandparents or from your friends? How did you start forming that mindset? Then you have to look at what part don't you want? And then you have to build a new picture. Build the picture of the mindset you want. See yourself in your imagination, becoming that person. See yourself doing the things, having the conversations with people. And then what you need to really do is think about your perception. So every time something happens, step back and think, is this through that new mindset that I'm building, or is this through the one that I currently have? And what do I need to do to change to make that new mindset? And that's the way you change your mindset. I want to just tell you a little bit of story that happened. I was not a fan of social media and didn't really want to do social media marketing. I didn't know why I had to do it for my business. Why do I have to do anything like that? And I was very resistant. Probably lost me a couple of years in my business. And then I started working with this gal who was showing me what to do. And at one point, something just clicked. It just all clicked together. And I became very involved in that social media marketing. And I started to understand. You see, I didn't understand. I was not aware of what I didn't know. Once I became aware of how to utilize it, I started to embrace it. And I started to change. That change first came with a desire to be somebody different. And I had to do things that were uncomfortable, very uncomfortable for me in order to change. And that's what I help my clients do. I help them to do the uncomfortable things and make it comfortable for them so that they too can reach the goals that they choose to have and live the lifestyle that they want instead of the lifestyle that they think they have to accept. And so that's how I work with companies and businesses to help them grow and scale their business so that they become the person they want to be, because deep inside it's there. And you may think you don't have anything deep inside of you that you want to do or to be, but I guarantee you take some time, you take about a month of spending 30 minutes a day meditating, I guarantee you, you will find something inside of you that really is what you desire to have. And then you can build the life of your dreams.